Yashovardhan Azad, one of India's most well-known and well-regarded commentators on matters intelligence. He's a former IPS and former Special Director with the Intelligence Bureau. Mr. Azad, welcome. Gaurav, thanks for being with us. Mr. Azad, what do you make of this, sir? You know, for the lay person, that Canadian intelligence, and this is not something we are saying, the son of Hardeep Nijjar says that Canadian intelligence was meeting his father every week to brief him and to hold meetings. What do you think that was about, sir?
You know, Shiv, you have raised a lot of pertinent questions also before. Let me add a few, because if you have any formal, murder investigation, there are so many trails you like to pick up and then you thread in between. In this particular case, what is really intriguing is that after even 3.5 months, there have been no suspects, there have been no statements, there have been, and by the way, if you look at the a very deep study by Washington Post, even the people who are living nearby have not been questioned. So apparently, how is this investigation being done? What does not do? The second part is that this is absolutely mind-boggling when the son says that he was having a regular meeting with the CSIS. Now, obviously, as an intelligence man or as a cop, I would say he could have been one of the assets. Because mind you, Shiv, this gentleman, Mr. Nijjar, had gone over to Pakistan to meet the KTF chief. And on your platforms, you said it so many times that he went to Tara. This was an information. We also gave this information to the Canadians, that the Canadians were already aware of this information because this travel was facilitated, obviously, by the ISI. The other thing which is very, very visible and known to everyone is the collaboration between the ISI offices in Canada and the various Khalistani groups. These Khalistani groups who are running extortion rackets, as you already pointed out, also being funded in some of these gurdwaras. So a lot of these actions are resulting in inter-gang rivalry. And mind you, there was a murder before Ripu Daman Malik's. And then even later, there is another murder. But these two murders have not raised any hackles in Canada. Only the Nijjar murder has raised. So obviously, he was somebody important. Either an ISI mole. He was certainly an asset for the Canadian intelligence services because he was giving the information, and that's usual. I mean, I don't think something is even wrong with that because they would like to get information about the Khalistani activities.
Correct.
But the point, after getting so much of information about Khalistani, nothing was done. And lastly, the most important point, if it was conveyed to Nijjar that there is a serious threat on you, then why wasn't he given security? This is
very mind-boggling. And, hearing an assessment like that, Gaurav, from a former Special Director of Intelligence Bureau, makes this very plain, makes this very black and white to us, in an area that is otherwise grey. Amazing questions being asked by Mr. Azad, Gaurav. Was he an ISI mole? Very likely that he was some kind of an informant, which is not on the face of it surprising. It's very possible that he was, which leads to the question, who bumped him off? And if there was a threat to his life, why wasn't he protected by the Canadian intelligence? Whatever be the case, Gaurav, it looks like there is a big cover-up at play.
There is a big cover-up, perhaps an attempt to blame India for a crime where India is very categorically saying we've had absolutely no role to play. You heard the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, say that's not India's policy. And India wanted this man arrested. Had Canada actually taken action on all the dossiers that India had sent after designating Hardeep Singh Nijjar as a terrorist under UAPA, Prevention of Unlawful Activities Act, the Canadian agencies could have arrested him and put him in jail. Perhaps he would have been alive. They could have extradited him into India. Perhaps he would have been alive. But they did nothing. They kept meeting him, according to the Sun, every week. Every week there was a meeting, which means he must have been someone really important as far as the Canadian intelligence agencies were concerned, that they'd met him on the 17th. That's one day before the murder. He was murdered on the 18th. There was another meeting, according to the Sun, scheduled for the 20th. So if they were meeting him so frequently on the 17th and then again on the 20th, which means he had some kind of information that the intelligence agencies really wanted. And was that the reason he was bumped off, that someone didn't want that intelligence to reach the Canadian intelligence agencies? And was he actually playing a double game, working with the ISI, as Mr. Yashovardhan Azad very rightly pointed out, and as you've reported, Shiv. He traveled to Pakistan. He'd gone to Nankana Sahib. He'd met other terrorists there, including Tara, and those pictures are out in public domain. All of that seemed to indicate that there was a much bigger racket. Now, was this racket just about human trafficking? Was this racket just about drugs? Or was this terror, extortion and drugs rolled in together? Which, incidentally, after the killing of Ripudaman, and also about that Sukhdev Singh, that other two killings which, as Mr. Azad very rightly pointed out, that Sukhdev Singh, Sukha's killing hasn't raised anybody's hackles. But is that the gang war that is happening to perhaps silence those who may have been paying off people to continue that gang operations and extortion operations in Canada? So there are many layers and unfortunately very shoddy investigations in the past 3 months by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Absolutely. What we know about the investigation so far is the very opposite of inspiring confidence. Mr. Azad, this is a complicated issue, a grey issue, many different scenarios and layers like Gaurav put it. But would you say that on the one hand, you've got this, fairly obvious presence of a gangster terrorist nexus, that has collusions and linkages with the Canadian establishment and intelligence agencies. And on the other hand, on the back of what Nijjar's son says, there is very, very evidently some kind of cover-up going on, sir.
Apart from the cover-up, there are two things which are worrying me as an Indian officer and also as a countryman. One is that there is a huge kind of a build-up being given and a hype being created that are happening in Punjab, and that is why these fellows are going on forged passports and trying to seek amnesty and going as a refugee, which is telling the world, in Punjab Sikhs are being persecuted and all. Whereas in actual practice, what is happening is Punjab is least affected by the impact of Khalistani activities. It is impacted in criminal terms by the kind of the gang wars and the extortions which we are doing, like the killing of Sidhu Moosewala. Yeah. And the second thing is that this racket is really creating a danger to the democratic world, because this kind of secessionism in the name of freedom, if it is allowed in other countries, then it's going to be a serious matter. And the world has to look into it, because it is in complete violation of international norms and laws. In Canada, Shiv, when there was a trucker strike, there was a very strict action taken by Trudeau. They were all put behind bars. But when the threat is coming to the diplomats, when the consulate is being out, when posters are being replaced, and the worst thing, the Indian flag is being stomped on the streets, if you do nothing, then this is an actual danger to a free world. And these two things must be looked into. So I think it is some kind of a cover-up, because as I've already said, these are my questions, whether it's an asset, whether it's an ISA guy. In fact, there were two ISI guys who were also held for questioning. I don't know what happened. There is no news about this investigation except those in apostrophe, so-called credible allegations and the indicators. So we are still not aware as to what exactly they have by way of credible evidence.
And those credible allegations or evidence or what have you, has gone completely silent for the last 6 days. Trudeau hasn't said a word about all of this for the last 6 days. So it's leading a lot of people to wonder whether there is a rethink, whether the Canadian establishment has sensed that this entire campaign against India has backfired diplomatically, and they're trying to cut their losses and cover their tracks. Who knows how it's going to unfold at this point of time? Canada most certainly looking extremely suspicious in the wake of what the terrorist's son, the dead terrorist's son himself is saying. Yashovardhan Azad, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for giving us your wisdom. Helps us understand the story a whole lot better. Gaurav, also thanks for those inputs on that.